Hello and welcome to day 30 of the daily Bible reading. Today we'll be looking at Exodus chapters 25 to 27 and Acts chapter 6. Now, the Exodus section is not the most exciting thing to read through. It is some very detailed instructions for how to build a place of worship for God. So the people have been in the wilderness for a while. They are remembering the beautiful temples that they saw to the gods in Egypt before they were freed by God. And now they're wanting something special as a place to worship God, especially as they're building this new relationship with God. So God gave Moses some instructions on how to put together a new worship place. This is not anything like what they had in Egypt. So these two chapters go through how they make a tent, how they put together what we call the Ark of the Covenant, the holy place where God's presence was, an altar, a courtyard for people to gather. But all of this, it says what kind of resources to use. This is a temporary worship place. It can be moved around. It's portable. This is not like the temples in Egypt that were built of massive stones and you built in one place, and some of them are still here today, 2,000 and 3,000 years later. What the Hebrew people were building was portable. It could move as they moved, but it was a place that was going to be special. It used pure gold. It used fine woods and fabrics. So it was a special place, but there was a humility in that it would go with them as they moved around. Looking at chapter 6 in Acts, it starts with a story of discrimination. We now have a growing set of believers who come from a Greek background, who are Hellenistic, who were Gentiles. They did not grow up in the Jewish faith like Jesus and the original disciples had. And there are a lot of Jews who have come to this new belief, this new way of Jesus. And there's tension between the groups. Now, there are different times in Acts where there's arguments over whether everyone needs to be circumcised, because the Greek-speaking people were not circumcised. They felt that that was an inappropriate physical act to take against human bodies. But the Jewish people still felt that this was an important rule from God that all male believers be circumcised. In this case, we're talking in chapter 6 about how widows are being treated. So throughout the Old Testament, we hear how widows are very important to God and how we are supposed to take special care to make sure that widows have a place to live and have enough food to eat and have enough to have a dignified life. So the complaint is that the Greek widows are not getting the same amount of support as the Hebrew or Jewish widows have been getting. So they get together and they have a conversation. Instead of just sitting and complaining and arguing and fighting over this, they sit down and they come up with a solution. Their solution is to bring together a select body of people who are going to be in charge of this caring ministry. Now, later, sometimes this group of people is called deacons, people who are focused on ministry of serving and caring for people in need. But Stephen is one of the disciples who is selected to be part of this group. And he is well known for his care and his commitment to the way of Jesus. So they solve this problem. They've got a group of people who's taking care of all the widows equally. This is great, but there is growing opposition to the early believers. They have not yet gotten the name Christian, but this early church that is forming is still causing a lot of problem among the Jewish religious authorities because they are afraid that this new movement is going to upset the arrangement that they have with the Roman authorities, giving the Jewish religious authorities the right to perform their rituals and to worship God the way that they have been worshiping God since the time of Moses. Some people try to debate Stephen, but Stephen always wins. Stephen really knows his Bible. Stephen understands the way of Jesus, and Stephen is eloquent and caring. And so the people who are opponents of the early believers discover that they really can't undermine the believers directly. And so instead, they decide to go and bribe some people to lie. And these people then go to the religious authorities and spread lies about the early believers, which ends up having Stephen arrested, captured, and brought before the religious authorities, where it is said that his face shines like an angel's. For those of us today, as we're reading this, I think there's a couple things for us to think about. One is, what does our spiritual life look like? Are there certain resources that we use? Do we have a candle? Do we have a Bible? Do we have a place that we go and we read and pray regularly to spend time with God in our personal lives at home? Are we part of a religious community that has gathered some resources together to create a holy space where people can come together to be in God's presence, to learn what God wants us to know, and to work together to serve the needs of our community? Another thing for us to think about is, how do we handle discord and arguments within our faith community? In this reading today, we see how they come together, have a conversation, and come up with a solution and work together. They may not agree on everything, but they come up with a way that they can continue to work together. And I think these days we're so used to splitting apart when there's any type of disagreement whatsoever. It's really hard for us to think about trying to come up with ways to stay together and to work together so we can continue doing ministry together. I think this is a big witness that we can take from the book of Acts, is that we need to not just let stuff fester and simmer on a slow boil until everyone blows up at each other. When there's an issue, we need to gather people together and discuss it and figure out a solution so that we can move on and continue to do the work that God has given us to do. Hope you've enjoyed the readings today. We'll see you next time.